You can't be an expert when your dataset is two objects and the third one doesn't match either of them. But that's exactly what comet experts are claiming about Atlas. And when Loeb published data showing 13 anomalies that defy natural explanation, they didn't engage with the evidence. They tried to censor it. Here's what happened. Loeb submitted his first paper on Atlas to a journal analyzing its properties and trajectory. At the end, he included one sentence. If 3I Atlas is a solid object with a physical radius larger than 10 kilometers, then the limited interstellar reservoir of rocky materials would suggest that its trajectory favored a plunging orbit towards the inner solar system, perhaps by technological design. One sentence. Backed by calculations showing the statistical improbability of Atlas's mass and trajectory occurring naturally. Chris Lintott, serving as editor of the journal, insisted that Loeb remove this sentence before the paper could be accepted for publication. Not because the math was wrong, not because the logic was flawed, because the conclusion suggested something Lintott didn't want discussed. Comment justice. If you think Loeb was not treated fairly, this is the same Chris Lintott who publicly called discussion of technological interpretations for interstellar objects nonsense on stilts, just weeks after Atlas was discovered, well before any detailed data about its properties had been collected. He made his judgment before the evidence, then used his editorial position to prevent conclusions that contradicted his predetermined view. So Loeb did what any scientist should do when faced with censorship. He wrote an entire peer-reviewed paper on the technological interpretation, co-authored with colleagues, and published it in a different journal that welcomed the analysis. They tried to silence one sentence. He gave them a full paper instead. Now let's talk about what the scientific establishment considers legitimate versus nonsense. Two major physics experiments just concluded after spending a combined $90 million searching for sterile neutrinos, ghost particles, that don't interact with matter. These experiments were motivated by anomalies in previous data that suggested an additional neutrino type beyond the three flavors in the standard model. Microboon and Katrin conducted extensive searches using neutrino oscillation data and tritium beta decay measurements across 259 days of observation, analyzing 36 million electron emissions. The result? They excluded the sterile neutrino hypothesis at 95% confidence level. The ghost particles don't exist. The anomalies had other explanations. $90 million spent testing a failed idea. But here's the critical point. Nobody called the search for sterile neutrinos nonsense on stilts. Nobody demanded that physicists stop exploring explanations beyond the standard model. Nobody censored papers suggesting new particle types. The scientific community recognized that testing potential explanations for anomalies, even when those explanations fail, is fundamental to expanding knowledge at research frontiers. Yet when Loeb analyzes 13 documented anomalies in Atlas, trajectory threading with trillion-to-1 odds, industrial chemical ratios, anti-tail pointing toward the sun, non-evaporating swarm, jets maintaining impossible geometry, acceleration without fragmentation, Jupiter Hill radius targeting, and suggests that technological origin deserves consideration alongside natural explanations, he gets censorship and mockery. Loeb has now published 11 papers on Atlas. 3 of those papers attempt to explain the anti-tail through natural processes, ice fragments that evaporate before turning around, or large objects not affected by solar radiation. All 3 natural explanations face problems fitting the observations. The anti-tail flipped orientation relative to motion at perihelion. Micrometer scale refractory dust would be swept away by solar radiation and wind. The structure contains something else that maintains formation across varying solar distances. The anti-tail appears in the highest resolution Hubble images before and after perihelion. The orientation reversed relative to Atlas's direction of travel. This is definitely not a perspective effect like some solar system comets display. It's real geometry demanding physical explanation, and natural models struggle to account for it. NASA officials and comet experts display what Loeb calls the arrogance of expertise when confronted with Atlas's anomalies. They claim expert status on interstellar objects despite a sample size of exactly two previous examples, Oumuamua and Borisov, and Atlas displays 13 documented differences from both. How can anyone claim expertise when the third example breaks all the patterns established by the first two? The physics community gets $90 million to search for particles that turned out not to exist, and that's celebrated as legitimate frontier science even after the hypothesis fails. Loeb publishes mathematical analysis showing Atlas defies natural comet behavior in 13 distinct ways, suggests technological origin deserves investigation alongside natural explanations, and gets told to remove sentences from papers and gets publicly mocked, 11 papers published, 13 anomalies documented with statistical analysis and observational data. Peer-reviewed work accepted in multiple journals after one editor tried censorship. And still the response from self-proclaimed experts is dismissal rather than engagement with the evidence. Who's really ignoring evidence here? The scientists publishing detailed analysis of unprecedented observations, or the experts insisting everything must fit categories defined by a sample size of two? As Loeb writes, the foundation of science is the humility to learn, not the arrogance of expertise. Follow for more.